is on March 15th, a stink bomb explodes, which is this holiday on the debt ceiling. There has been no debt ceiling since October 2015. It becomes frozen in on that date at whatever level we're at, probably 20 trillion plus. They'll have 200 billion of cash. It'll take them a couple months to use it up. They'll be in a debt ceiling crisis. Lose it up, use it up. They'll be in a debt ceiling crisis by June, and all of this legislation is going to be backed up. The infrastructure, the corporate tax reform. I'm for the corporate tax reform. Over time, lower rates, a broader base, even this border-adjusted view that turns it really into a VAT is a good idea. But it has to be paid for. It can't be added to the debt.
So you are in the establishment position on that.
I wouldn't call it the establishment.
Well, I want you to just react to this because it sounds like you are. I don't want to put words in your mouth. This is from former Treasury Secretary John Snow telling me yesterday he agrees with the Mitch McConnell view, pay for these things. React to this. John Snow yesterday. You know this better than I. What's your sense of where this stands?
Well, Neil, we need tax reform. U.S. tax rates are too high. It penalizes our ability to be competitive in the world economy. I think with tax reform, Neil, most people will find that over time they get more in their paychecks. But tax cuts have to be paid for. Tax cuts don't pay for themselves.
All right, tax cuts have to be paid for. He's equating it to spending. Spending has to be paid for. Whatever you risk going deep into debt for in one area, you have to make up for in another. Do you agree with that? That there's no differentiation between tax cuts?
No,
I
don't. No, I believe spending cuts are far better, far more important than we ought to do those first. But if we're going to have a large tax reform, it needs to have pay for itself with spending cuts or a broader base or a tariff on imports and a rebate on exports.
But in other words, if you're depending on that revenue, you can't change the revenue.
You can't, when you cut the revenue, let's say by 100 or 200 billion, maybe you'll get 30 or 40 billion of flow back, so make it a net 160. But beyond that, that 160 has to be paid for. Now, I think the Republican tax plan is a good one. But the idea that we're going to have...
I don't even know what it is.
Well, the outline of the House plan, okay? But the point I'm making is we don't have an open runway, a clean balance sheet to try some, huge experiment in an unfunded tax increase that will drive us deeper. Why? There's $800 billion in new borrowing this year alone. That's built in before one dime of Trump reform or infrastructure, all the rest of it. It's 10 or 12 trillion over the next decade before we do anything with the Trump program.